Hi, and welcome to the latest episode, the third indeed, of the Change from the Centre podcast. This time I'm going to do what I said I was going to do, which is a review of the budget. And not necessarily a review of the contents of the budget, but I think look at the politics of the budget. And what I want to look at and talk about is the forerunner to the budget, the very long forerunner to the budget, the actual event itself, actually on the day, and then some of the consequences and some of the thinking about how we move forward from how we might want to move forward. It's up to anybody else if they ever listen to what I say, but how we might want to move forward from where we are. Which I think we need a bit of a think, as we do with pretty much everything in British politics. So the first thing for me is the forerunner to the budget. We've always had this thing where Chancellor of the Exchequers and ministers and MPs, if they're briefed and whoever, don't release the contents of the budget beforehand. And so everything that comes out on budget day is basically a surprise, and hopefully a well thought out surprise. And it's changed nowadays. So what you get is, in the run up to the budget, you get all these leaks. You get ministers. Basically, what they're doing is kite flying to see what is or what isn't acceptable. So, as an example, we went through this thing about, okay, should we raise the level of income tax? And there was a bit of a rebellion from backbench MPs. There was all this comment about the fact that it would be a manifesto breach and all those things. So they slowly rein back on that and think about doing something else. And in the past, where the contents of budgets have been released, there have been resignations. Nowadays, I'm not gonna predict what the contents of the budget and all this thing. It's not said in any meaningful way. It is said because they want it as an excuse to not speak about something, and there's got to be a decision made somewhere, hasn't there? I think what we need is somebody to actually say, right, forget that. We are just going to do some speculation, do some discussions from about 2 months before or whatever. It seems like about 6 months this time, but I think it was about 1 or 2. So that so that we can get an idea of where we're going, and so we can flag things up for people and whatever. And then, or we say we're going back to how it used to be. My preference, I think, is to go back how it used to be. And there's a reason for that. It's about political leadership. I think that the Chancellor, and yes, alongside her ministerial team, alongside the cabinet, and alongside the Prime Minister, need to be sitting there basically and making decisions based on what they think is right. And putting that in the budget. Yes, there's a bit of listening, and they will obviously use some of the comments in the media. They'll probably use focus groups and things like that. Great, but let's do something based on what is right, and what is right, rather than this kite flying. And I have to say, I don't think backbench MPs on the Labour Party side have helped this process because of the threatened rebellions and all those things. And if I was the Prime Minister, I would have tried to make the point to them that, look, we've got a 5-year government here. We're 2 years into it. What do we need to do? Well, actually, let's get the things sorted first before we actually move on and deal with the wish list. And I think it'd have been a better way. And I think if he said it publicly and said it to them, I think it would have been the best thing to do. But obviously, he's looking, he's looking after his back, and so is the Chancellor. And so he's not doing that. He's doing the short-term populist thing again. And it goes back to what I said in the first video. We've got prime ministers who've got an average life at the moment of about 2 years, and it means he's not thinking and doing the right things. And I'll talk about more of that later on. But what about budget day itself? Well, I don't think there are any surprises on budget day. I think and to be fair to the Chancellor, most of what she was doing, I think, was sort of announced during the budget. Not too much was missed out and was picked out of the books. I think there was a few bits, but not many. I thought the Chancellor spoke well, but there's no doubt about it that what she did was put taxes up, and put taxes up in a way that we haven't seen for ages. But let's bear in mind the Conservatives did that as well, and the Conservatives raised taxes to a record level as well. And it looks like where we are with taxation at the moment is slowly approaching the European way and the European culture. Now, that's difficult. I thought also, by the way, that overall, Kemi Badenoch, in her response to the budget, spoke really, really well. And I think probably the best she has done. And certainly the backbenchers in the House of Commons absolutely loved it. I want to focus on two parts of what she said, though. And it's about, again, it's about learning and changing, and what is acceptable in my view and what isn't. It's up to you to decide whether you agree or not. But the point for me is there were a few points she made where she was really playing to the backbenches, and I don't mind that. I'll give you an example. This is one of them.
For all this chaos and disorder. There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up.
No, I don't mind that sort of stuff. I mean, you know, it's playing to an audience, and some of the other stuff she did, she created some fantastic sound bites, which were actually used. And all them are good, and I think they're good. And a lot of what she did was criticised actions and everything else. But every now and again, she moved into something that was quite personal, and this is an example of that.
So we're stuck with them both, Laurel and Foolhardy.
Now that, to me, that's and there was a few of them. That's what we will need to get rid of, and there's a couple of reasons. Kemi Badenoch is clever enough to know when to do that, when not to do that, and everything else. But this is not just about Kemi Badenoch. It's about politics as a whole, and there are politicians, certainly at a local level, and people that watch politics and comment on it on YouTube, on X, and all those things, that aren't necessarily as adept with language and everything else in the way that she is. And they see that, and they see that as an opportunity to adopt and adapt to the same culture. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is that it gives them almost the go-ahead to use the same language in what they're doing on social media, in what and in the conversations they have with others. To a certain extent, what people do, well, to a very, very large extent, what people do about, you know, in their own backyard and in their conversations in the pubs is fine, but not when it comes to X and Twitter. And that's why you are part of the reason why we are getting this tirade of abuse at some people, because they think that if Kemi Badenoch is okay to do that and resort to insulting language and insulting people, then it's okay for them to do it. And it's not just Kemi Badenoch; it's a good opportunity to bring out something that is in the culture of politics, and start to challenge exactly why we need to think about language within and around politicians as a way of dealing with the issues with social media, almost accepting that the language of politicians is a contributor to the language that we're seeing on Twitter and other places. And I've got friends and people I know who are MPs and whatever who get some absolutely horrific abuse. That's also true of councillors as well. And it's not acceptable, and we've got to move away from it. And if we want to fix broken politics, politicians have to be the starting point for it. So that really is my sort of comments on the budget itself. I'll talk a little bit about the follow-up from the budget. Because first of all, one of the things that has really, really annoyed me about the follow-up to the budget is a lot of commentary that is saying basically that because they froze and chose to froze the tax thresholds again, that was a breach of the manifesto commitment. It may be true. It probably is true. But it was also true when Rishi Sunak, if it's true now, it was also true when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, because when the general election before, the triple tax lock was in place then, and if keeping thresholds and freezing thresholds is a breach of that triple tax lock now, it was a breach then. And the thing I suspect is this is the media finding their angle to challenge the Prime Minister and use the comments like resign and stuff like that, which Beth Rigby did in what I thought was, I didn't like it as an interview, to be fair. Beth Rigby did one. You can look it up on YouTube. Beth Rigby's interview with the Chancellor, which was done in an informal setting. And I really like Beth Rigby. She's quite challenging sometimes. But this notion that you've frozen tax thresholds and therefore you've breached the manifesto, when that challenge hasn't been there for anybody else when they've done the same thing, I think is very, very unfair. And I think the media could have found a different angle. They didn't have to find an angle that said the Chancellor should resign, the Prime Minister should resign. They should have found an angle that said, where are you going with this? And this probably is my final point today. One of the things that's missing at the moment, and I think was missing during Rishi Sunak's time, and actually something I was screaming out for, not just for his time as Prime Minister, I was screaming out for during COVID, was some sort of sense about where we're going with the economy at the moment. Our taxes are going up. There's no two ways about it. Our debt is just about stable, I think, forecast to rise. I think inflation is forecast to start coming down, which is really important in my view. But we really don't have an end game. So we're seeing we don't really see a positive. We don't see a. I'm trying to find the right way I put in it, but a positive path for the government to take to get us out of the spot we're in. And it is a spot. And, unless we get out of it, unless we find ways of making growth happen, if we find ways of putting money back in people's pockets, whether it's by reducing taxation or through tax rises and through doing what I've talked about within One Nationism, which is raising the bottom bar at a faster rate than you raise the top bar. Anything like that, we need something of a path. And this is the thing I'd like the government to do, is to sit down, and continuously almost, but map out a path, and a path that says this is where we are. Okay, this is why these are the taxes we've raised. These are why we've raised them, and also here's where we think we are in 3 years' time. Come the general election, we think we'll be here. And talk about what sort of growth we'll have, what that will mean for my pocket and your pocket, and really plan it out strategically, and then plan it out and say, for the next 5 years after that, here's our prediction. There's always unknowns in this because the UK economy is subject to downturns and will be impacted by downturns in the global economy. But there's definitely a way forward here to start to explain things to people. The point I've made before, we've got fantastic social media channels. All too often, they're a force for the bad. Government need to start turning around and using them as a force for good. And part of that is creating this insightful stuff that suggests and gives us an idea that they've got some sort of medium to long-term strategy. Because without a long-term strategy that talks about how we get our infrastructure up to, at the very least, a modern standard, if not an ultra-modern standard, I fear that we're heading to a point where we've got, and somebody made this point on Sky, so it's me copying somebody else's words. We head to a point where we've got a second world economy. That's blunt. We can't keep borrowing. We can't keep doing what we're doing unless we start to really grow and find ways of paying back debt. Lowering inflation will help that. My big concern about that, I mean, it's bad for Britain as a whole anyway, but if we are drifting into that position where we've got a second world economy, we're doing so at a time when there's huge global instability, and a time when, Putin is, if in my view, if he gets the sort of settlement we're talking about, where he can claim a win in front of the Russian people, where he will become a threat to Europe. And so, we part of what we need to do with a medium-term strategy is set out how we're going to do that. The government have done some stuff about what they're doing to invest in defence, actually, recently, but there's not really a plan about how we're going to fund it. There's not really a plan about how we get to the sort of level of spending as a percentage of GDP that we need. So maybe up to 3.5%, 4%, 5%, whatever it needs to be. We need to be showing Russia that actually we're not messing about. Not just us, Europe, NATO as a whole, but we certainly, in my view, need to be doing it. So that is basically my review of the budget day. I do think we've got lessons to learn from it, and I'm not singling out the government in any way. We can't pretend that the government didn't inherit a mess. They did, but now's about the time where they need to start showing that we're getting out of it, and that's the bit I'm not sure about. And I also wish the Conservatives would be a bit more humble about the fact that they did pass on a huge issue for the country. Same again. If you've liked what I've said, please do all the things, like, subscribe, and anything, and in particular, please share what I'm about. I've just set up a new YouTube channel called Change from the Centre, where I'm uploading my videos, so that makes it a bit more structured. And the other thing is, please comment. I've had some wonderful comments, and I just want to reply to one of them. This isn't a mullet. It's just my hair being combed back. But yeah, if you've enjoyed it, please subscribe. There'll be more coming, I suspect, somewhere around about the beginning of next week. If and if you've liked it or you haven't, tell me what you think. The main thing is, share it, let other people know. The more other people know about it, get a chance to look at it and make a decision on whether they want to know more, the better. Once again, thanks very much, and I will speak to you again next week.